إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O mankind, have taqwa in your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should fear Him and you should love Him. You should work in His obedience and refrain from His disobedience. For He is the one who created you min nafsin wahida, from a single soul, Adam alayhi salam. And from that soul He created his wife. And from them too He made many men and many women. So have taqwa in Allah, the one in which you ask one another concerning. And also have at-taqwa bil-arham. You should fear Allah regarding the arham. And you should have taqwa. You should have cautiousness. You should deal with great care when it comes to the arham, the relations of the womb. Your mother and your father and your parents and your children and your wife and your spouses and the family as a whole. For verily inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. Allah is over you, watching you, supervising you, seeing all that you do. So fear Allah Jalla fi'ula regarding your families. Know that this is a favor from the favors of Allah Jalla fi'ula upon each and every one of us. So fear Allah regarding that favor. This is an ayah, a miracle from the miracles of Allah. The relationship that is between spouses. As Allah, He said in the Quran, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And amongst the signs and amongst the ayat, amongst the miracles of Allah, is how He created you in pairs. He created for you spouses amongst one another, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. So you can find some peace, some tranquility, some rest in your homes in one another. And He placed between you مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. He placed between you love and affection, attraction, intimacy, as well as mercy, forbearance, patience with one another. In that is ayat. In that is clear signs for people who want to think and people who want to remember. So be from those who they obey Allah Jalla fi'ula concerning their families. And they seek to draw nearer to Allah concerning their families. Getting married, having children, for me, is about Allah. Is about my obedience and worship of Allah. And I want to establish a household that is a household that obeys, that remembers our Lord Jalla fi'ula. As the believers they say, Ibadur Rahman, the worshippers of Ar-Rahman, they're described by saying the dua. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. And those who they say, oh Allah, gift us from our spouses and our children قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ, the delights, the coolness of our eye. What does that mean? that when I see them obeying you and worshiping you, reciting Quran and praying, that brings my heart delights. Oh Allah, allow that for me. Let me see that in my spouse. Let me see that in my children. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, and make us for the believers leaders. So this is marriage as Allah Jalla fi'ula, He describes it throughout the Quran. A beautiful relationship that the husband and the wife, they share. Don't let the community that you live in, America and the kuffar, corrupt what is between you and your wife, what is between you and your children. Don't be from those who attack and fight and debate and keep count and keep score in their household day and night, living the type of lives that the kuffar they live. So be from those who they turn to the Quran and they quote ayatul Quran when it comes to their marriages. We all memorize, us men, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are in charge of women. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً. And men have a degree over women. And if prostrating was made mandatory, the woman would have prostrated to the husband. We memorize it. We scream it. We yell it in our house. Which of us memorizes and mentions هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. You are a clothing for them, and they are a clothing for you. You're a garment for them, and they're a garment for you. You complete them, and they complete you. This ayah, it came before الرِّجَالُ قَوَّمُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. It came before الرِّجَالُ وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً. Which of us are as motivated for this ayah as we are for that one? Or do we have the characteristic of Bani Israel? أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in parts of the book and disbelieve and reject other parts of the book? Because if you brought up الرِّجَالُ قَوَّمُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ صِدْقًا وَخَالِصًا لِلَّهِ, you were truthful and you were sincere to Allah in bringing that ayah up because you wanted to uphold the Quran, then why is it that we skip over this ayah? Bi-idhnillah, after today, we'll be looking at the Quran in its entirety and the Sunnah in its entirety when it comes to the relationship that we have with one another. Wallahi, it is a beautiful relationship. You're blessed to have it. And you need to thank Allah for it by working in His obedience concerning it. Understanding the rights that each of you have over one another. So quote this ayah from now on. And be from those who are pure. For Allah, He said, الخبيثات للخبيثين والخبيثون للخبيثات والطيبات للطيبين والطيبون للطيبات أولئك مبرؤون مما يقولون لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم. Pure men are for pure women, and pure women are for pure men. And filthy men are for filthy women, and filthy women are for filthy men. So be from those who are tayyibun. Be from those who are righteous before marriage, so Allah could grant you a righteous spouse. And during your marriage, become guided. Return to Allah in tawbah, so Allah could also guide your spouse to that. So today, bi-idhnillah, we'll be taking 9 pieces of marriage advice. You take these and you go home with them today. And there should be a difference in your life after today. You should not go home and be the same man and be the same woman after hearing these. Be from those who they hear the qawl and they follow it. سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. And don't be from those who they just reject and have deaf ears. So the first advice and the most important advice is that concerning our marriages, we need to have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah, He commanded us in that ayah, Ya ayyuhan nas ittaqu rabbakum. And He mentioned spouses in that ayah. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his dying words on his deathbed, the final words that he spoke was as-salah, as-salah. Prayer, prayer. And then he said, ittaqullaha fima malakat aymanukum. And fear Allah concerning what your right hands possess. The concubines. And the woman, the wife in Islam, has much more rights. than the concubine. So if the Prophet ﷺ advised us his final words in fearing Allah concerning the women in general, then you need to fear Allah. Have taqwa of Allah Jalla fi'ula in your hearts concerning your wife. In that ayah that we love to quote, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, men are placed in charge of women. You have to fear Allah concerning that. Make sure that you're providing, that you're doing your part. And other than just providing, that you are in charge of the woman's feelings. You're in charge of taking care of them emotionally as well. That you fear Allah concerning that ayah. At the end of the ayah, Allah, He said, after giving you this position of authority, He said, don't forget, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. At the end of that ayah, you're in a place of authority, but don't forget, Allah is the greatest. Allah is the most high. So don't get too arrogant. Don't get too ahead of yourself, as a lot of us do. We become tyrants in the household because of the authority that was given to us. It was given to you to take care of your family, not to abuse them. So the Messenger alayhi salawatu wasalam, if we have taqwa of Allah in our hearts, we turn to what Allah mentioned and what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, so we can implement what he mentioned. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أريت النار فإذا أكثر أهلها النساء يكفرن قيل أيكفرن بالله قال يكفرن العشير ويكفرن الإحسان لو أحسنت إلى إحداهن الدهر ثم رأيت منك شيئا قال ما رأيت منك خيرا قط. Sahih Bukhari. The Prophet said, I was shown the fire, and the majority of its people were women. So he said, yakfurna, they do kufr. We asked, do they disbelieve in Allah? He said, no, they do kufr bil ashir. They're ungrateful to their husbands. He can do nothing but good to this woman day in and day out and month and year. And she sees one bad quality in him and says, I've never seen any good in you. So women, we need to fear Allah concerning our husbands. Be grateful to your husband. Look at the story of Ismail alayhi salam. When he left his wife at home and he was working, and Ibrahim alayhi salam came into his home and he said, how is your condition? And the woman, she complained. So he told her, tell Ismail when he comes home to change his lock on his door. Ismail came home, he understood the message. That meant to divorce this woman. Later, Ibrahim alayhi salam comes again, finds a new woman. How's your condition? Alhamdulillah. All praise be to Allah. We have nothing but to thank Allah for. Our condition is good. Same living conditions. So instead of complaining, learn to be content with what you have. Be like that second woman in the story. He said, tell Ismail to keep his lock on his door. This is a good lock that he has. The woman is the lock, the foundation of the relationship, the backbone of it, the beauty of the life and the household. Happy wife, happy life, as the kuffar they say. So be from those women who are grateful and thankful. And men, you should fear Allah concerning this hadith. Many men, they take a hadith and many women, and we use them as weapons against each other. The majority of women are in the hellfire. La. A person who fears Allah, who knows what the hellfire is, doesn't want his wife to enter the hellfire. A woman who he loves, who he shares a bed with, doesn't want her to be from the people of the fire. So you help her and you aid her. Help her to be grateful to you. How do you help someone to be grateful? By not doing al-man, which is min al-kaba'ir, from the major sins in Islam. To keep reminding of favors that you do. I pay the bills and I break my back and I da. You make a person not want to be grateful to you. So don't be the source of misguidance. And give them something to be grateful for. Many of us don't spend any time, any effort, nothing on our women. And we say they're ungrateful. I pay the bills. I do the minimum requirements that's required of me. I spend 5 minutes a week with her. She needs to be grateful. Give them a reason to be grateful. If you feared Allah, you'd go to these ahadith and instead of using them as weapons, you would say, how can I aid my wife in this hadith? The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, المرأة إذا صلت خمسها وصامت شهرها وأحصنت فرجها وأطاعت بعلها فَلْتَدْخُلْ مِنْ أَيِّ أَبْوَابِ الْجَنَّةِ شَاءَتْ. The woman who she prays her 5, she fasts her Ramadan, she guards her private parts, and she obeys her husband, she'll be told to enter Jannah from any gate that she so wishes. So obey your husbands, listen to them, and look at that as being a door to Jannah for you. And oh men, make the pathway to Jannah easy for your women. You got married in the first place, we said. This is not Disney. We don't get married head over heels. Our purpose for marriage is what? To obey Allah. I'm staying away from haram. I want to establish a Muslim household. I want Muslim children. So if that was truly the case, help this woman get to Jannah. Make it easy for you to even be obeyed. Some of us, it's impossible to obey us. So many rules and laws and legislations, and we're so harsh. It's very difficult to obey us. We would not obey our own selves if those same restrictions were put on us. So be easygoing. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he also said in the famous hadith, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ. The best of you are those who are the best to their families, the best to their wives. And I'm the best to my family. I'm the best to my wives. The Prophet ﷺ, he walked the walk. Being religious is not just growing the beard and attending the masjid and memorizing Quran. The best of you are the best to their wives. So be the best to your wife. Ask her, am I the best to you? What areas do I have to improve in our relationship so I can be the best? It's not if you consider yourself to be the best. Allah Jalla fi'ala is going to be the judge. So ask one another and communicate. So what does it mean to be the best? How can you be the best to your wives? Hear them out. What are they asking and requesting of you? Many of us men, we want to pay the bills. We want to be the brave man. If somebody looks at my wife, I'm going to punch him in the face. I'm brave. That's manhood. That's being a husband. But what is it that the women are requesting of you? If you want to be the best to the wife, then you got to do what the wife requests of you. When listening to the women, we hear the same complaints, the same requests of the husbands that they're constantly rejecting and valuing as not important. What are those things? The women, they like that their feelings are validated. And to us men, that sounds like a bunch of baloney, a bunch of nonsense. What do you mean validate your feelings? They like to be validated. You could have yelled at your wife because she was in the street about to get hit by a car. And you yelled at her to get her out the street. She comes to you later, she says, the way you yelled at me hurt my feelings. And we look at them like they're crazy. I just saved you from the car. Are you out of your mind? And we yell again. As opposed to what? Just validating the feeling. They just want to be validated. That's it. Validated. We know what they did was wrong. They're wrong for feeling that way. But just validate it anyway. I understand. I'm sorry I yelled at you. My intention wasn't to hurt your feelings. I love you so much. I can't imagine life without you. I didn't want you to get hit by that car. And be a romantic man instead of having that waswas of shaitan in your ear, the whispers of shaitan who day and night wants to split you up with this woman. Be someone who has the taqwa of Allah, the consciousness of Allah, always there, always present. Validate that feeling. She says she thinks you're mean. She says you don't respect her. She says X, Y, and Z. Whether it's true, whether it's not true, she feels that way. And we need to understand that the way they feel is important because they're women. They're built upon feelings. And that's why they're much better at nurturing than we'll ever be. So that's who you're dealing with. You're not married to another man who's just logic, right, wrong, what's correct, what's incorrect. They don't work that way. They don't function that way. So listen to them. Hear them out. They want to be validated? Validate them. Be the best to your wives. Listen and be kind. As Allah, He commanded you in the Quran. وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And live with them with kindness and with what is customary and known. Be present in your marriage. A lot of us are absent. We don't exist. We come home, straight to sleep, straight to the TV. We're not there. Be there in your marriage. Communicate, talk, be with one another. Value, respect, and consider your wife, and vice versa. Value and consider and respect your husband. Don't ever degrade one another, especially the man to the woman. Don't degrade your wife. Don't yell, don't scream, don't shout, don't name call. This is absolutely unacceptable. There's no excuse for it. The woman in Islam is allowed to act up, but the men are not allowed to act up. We're not equal when it comes to this. Aisha radiallahu anha, she came when the Prophet ﷺ had guests, and she slammed the plate and broke it in front of his guests. Did the Prophet ﷺ lash out? Did he go down to that same level? He smiled and he said, "Gharat ummukum, your mother has become jealous." He defended her. That's rijal. Aina rijalul yawm. Where are the men today? Men is not by beating your chest and screaming and yelling. That's the Prophet ﷺ. Men need to be, you need to be perfect. You can't slip up. The women, ma'lash, we can forgive them, we can overlook. They're childish, they're emotional, they're having that time of the month. It's difficult on them, they were burdened all day, there's a lot of pressure on them. Ma'lash, it's okay. Not because she did that, I do this. No, the men are not allowed to stoop to that kind of level. You're not allowed to degrade yourself or degrade your wife. And your family this, and your father this, and your uncle this, and your brother that. That is absolutely impermissible. There's no room for it. There's no leeway for it. So fear Allah Jalla fi'ula regarding your women. Don't be harsh-hearted with them. Allah told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Law kunta faddan ghalidha al-qalbi lanfaddu min hawlik." If you were harsh-hearted, then the people would have ran away from you. The people, let alone the one who's living with you, sharing a bed with you. Don't be so harsh-hearted where it's impossible to live and to be around you. So have taqwa of Allah. This is the first and the most important piece of advice. The second is, as Allah, He mentioned in the ayah, He placed between you mawadda and rahmah. Love, affection, intimacy, and then mercy and forbearance and patience. Make sure that's present in your marriage. That you're intimate with your wife, physically and emotionally. There's something called emotional intimacy. Make sure you have it. Give that and you'll get what you want in return. Us men, we just want physical intimacy. Give the woman some emotional intimacy and you'll get what you want in return. Speak to them. Kind words. Be there in your marriage. Don't only hang out with them when you want something from them. This is bad character. You're going to make them hate the physical intimacy part. Every time he talks to me, every time he gets me a flower, every time we go on a date, he expects something in return. So now every time we do those things, I don't enjoy them. Be emotionally intimate as well. Have some mawaddah in your relationship, some attraction, some love, as well as rahmah, mercy. Be merciful towards one another. Forgive. Be patient, forbearant, deal with one another, which brings us to our next point. At-taghaful. Overlook. Overlook. This is going to save or break your marriage. You need to master this quality of overlooking. Overlooking one another's faults. Don't comment on every single little thing that the other person does. Overlook. Act like you didn't see it. Act like you didn't hear it. Ignore. Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu anhu, he lived with the Prophet ﷺ as a servant for 10 years. As a young boy. 10 years. And during that time, he says, radiallahu anhu, ما مسست دباجا ولا حريرا ألين من كف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I never touched any velvet or any silk softer than the hands of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If that's how the Prophet ﷺ was to his servant, don't you think he was even better to his wives? That his hands would be smooth. He wouldn't come to his wives in a very nasty way, filthy way. He said, I never touched hands smoother than the Prophet ﷺ. I never touched silk or velvet more smooth, more soft than the Prophet ﷺ's hands. وَلَا شَمَمْتُ رَائِحَةً قَطُّ أَطْيَبَ مِنْ رَائِحَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And I never smelt any scent more beautiful than the scent of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If he was smelling good around his servant, what do you think around the rest of his household and family? He said, وَلَقَدْ خَدَمْتُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ 10 سِنِينَ. I served the Prophet for 10 years. فَمَا قَالَ لِي قَطُّ أُفٍّ. He never said to me, ever. Never did he do that. Never said uff. He said, وَلَا قَالَ لِي شَيْءٍ فَعَلْتُهُ لِمَا فَعَلْتَهُ. He never said to anything that I did, why did you do that? Ever. And he never said, ولا قال لشيء فعلته لما فعلته ولا لشيء لم أفعله ألا فعلت كذا. And he never said to something I didn't do, why didn't you do that? So, if the Prophet ﷺ was like that to his servant, could we be like that to our wives? Could we be like that to our husbands? Why'd you do this and why'd you do that? Why'd I come home and the house is dirty? Why didn't you cook the food yet? Why is this not ready? Why is this look a mess? Blah, blah. Could we stop doing that? Why this and why that? And why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? Relax. And just live with a sukoon with one another. As Allah described in the Quran, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. So you can find peace and comfort and tranquility with one another. Be a source of comfort for one another. That's not comfortable. Being judged by your partner day in and day out. It's not comfortable. Nobody likes that. The Prophet ﷺ to his servant, and your wife's not your servant, never said, why did you do this? And why did you do that? And why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, استوصوا بالنساء خيرا فإن المرأة خلقت من ضلع وإن أعوج ما في الضلع أعلاه فإن ذهبت تقيمه كسرته وإن تركته لم يزال أعوج فاستوصوا بالنساء خيرا متفق عليه. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, take my advice regarding women. Act kindly towards them. For they were created from the rib. And the most crooked part of the rib is the uppermost part. If you attempt to straighten it, you're going to break it. If you leave it alone, it will remain crooked. So act kindly towards women. In the other narrations, if you want to benefit from the woman, you're going to benefit from her while there's crookedness in her. I demand respect. She can never get out of line with me. She can never mess up. She can't speak to me that way. If you're going to benefit from the woman, you're going to benefit with her mistakes. While she's crooked, while she's not 100%. Otherwise, you're going to break her. If you want her to be straight, you're going to break her. And breaking means talaq. It means divorce. So stop trying to straighten your woman so much. You can guide them. You can be a source of guidance. You can teach them. You can show them the right way. You can be patient with them as they become better over time. But to demand them to be straight and to fix them right now, you're going to break them. And it's going to lead to divorce. Whether you're right or whether you're wrong in the thing that you're trying to fix them in. That's not the point. The point isn't who's right and who's wrong. The point is the way that you deal with one another. You could be right. You could be 100% correct. She's dressing the wrong way. She shouldn't leave the house with makeup. Her jilbab should not be tight. You are correct. No one's saying you're wrong, but the method in which you approach it, the way that you speak, it needs to be a way of leniency. The fourth piece of advice is to be mature. The number one reason for divorce in the United States of America is immaturity, pettiness. He did this, so I did that. She did this, so I did that. We act like kids, wallahu al-azim. You sit in a marriage counseling meeting, you hear them talk, and it's like you're dealing with children. He did this, so I did that. She did this, so I did that. Be mature, grow up. Some of us have grandchildren. Grow up. Don't act like little kids. He took my toy, so I hit him in the face. It doesn't work like that. And again, men, the women, let them do what they want to do. Let them be disrespectful. Let them act up. You need to remain a man at the end of the day. So be mature in your marriages. Another very important advice that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us himself is trust. There's no relationship without trust. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنهما, Jabir رضي الله عنه, he said, نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet ﷺ forbade, he made it impermissible, أن يطرق الرجل أهله ليلا يتخونهم أو يلتمس عثراتهم. The Prophet ﷺ forbade that a man should come to his family in the night like a stranger, trying to catch them being immodest or impure, trying to catch them doing something they should not be doing. The Prophet ﷺ forbade that. When you come back from a journey, you let your wife know ahead of time. You're coming home from work, you call your wife, you shoot her a text. The sunnah when you enter your own home is to knock on the door. You don't spy on one another, take each other's phones and look through you don't do that. Trust needs to be present in a relationship or you're going to ruin that relationship. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم ما بعد. after having taqwa of Allah, fear of Allah in our hearts, after sharing mawadda and rahmah, love and mercy, after having at-taghaful, overlooking one another's faults, after being mature in our relationships, and after trusting one another, the sixth advice is that we must compromise for one another. You won't, you shouldn't, and you can't get every single thing that you want your way. It's not going to happen, and it can't happen that way. That's not what a relationship is. You need to compromise. You need to sacrifice for one another. Something you really want to do, but you let it go for the sake of the relationship that you both have with one another. So, sacrifice for one another. The seventh is that you communicate with one another. Communication in a relationship, any relationship, is of the most important things. There's a funny quote by a kafir. He says, women, they love what they hear, and men, they love what they see. That's why men will always lie, and women will always wear makeup. So if you know, not telling you to lie, but if you know women love what they hear, then give them what they love. Speak to them, and speak nice ways to them, the way that you used to speak back when you were Romeo, in those engagement days. The sweetest of words. You were a poet when you were engaged to your wife. Bring that back, and be sweet with your words the way that you were then. Women love what they hear, so give them what they love. And men love what they see. So women, dress nice and be presentable for your husband. He comes home from work, he finds you looking good. That brings love back into your relationship. Give each other what the other they love. So ask them. Communication, as we mentioned before, ask them, how good am I as a husband? How good am I as a wife? How can I improve with you? What are some areas that I'm lacking in? Communicate with one another. Speak and talk. And make sure, especially us men, that we are a safe space for them to come talk. Because a lot of times they don't feel comfortable around you. So they go and they backbite. They need to talk to someone. So they go speak behind your back because they can't come to you. You're the source of the problem. They can't come and tell you you're mean or you do this or you do that. Because every time you're approached, it's a fight, it's an argument, it's a war, it's a battle. So they go elsewhere. So be a source of communication for your wife, so she doesn't have any need to go elsewhere. And the woman should fear Allah concerning backbiting their husbands. The Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran mentioned, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. The righteous women, the salihat, they preserve what's hidden, what Allah kept hidden. You should be defending one another in public and not backbiting each other in public. You need to have commitment in your relationship. The eighth piece of advice, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ إِذَا عَمَلَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَمَلًا أَن يُتْقِنَهُ. Allah loves that if you do any action, that you perfect that action. What is more important to be perfected than your relationship? It's more important than your job. You should be perfecting your relationship more than you're trying to get that next promotion at your job. Be committed and work hard and don't stop working. The moment you stop working in your marriage is the moment that your marriage fails. And the final piece of advice is be a support for one another. Support one another. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. As we mentioned, men are placed in charge of women. You're in charge of them. Support them. Be a source of support. And women as well. Support your husbands. Khadija radiallahu anha. When the Prophet ﷺ was running after he received wahi for the first time, fearful, he said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, cover me, cover me. Khadija, she covered him. And he was scared that he was going to die or something bad was going to happen to him after seeing Jibreel, who took up the sky. She said, Allah will never disgrace you. You're a person, you keep ties. You're a person, you don't do filthy deeds. You're a person who's trustworthy. You're honest. You're this, you're that. And she was a source of comfort for him. So be like that for one another. We ask Allah Jalla fi'ala for His guidance in our marriages and in our relationships and in our families. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا كلها سرها وعلانيتها دقها وجلها. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا الله. اللهم اجعل من أهل الفردوس الأعلى. قم إلى